You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat.
And so I would argue then there's this difference between what is romance and what is romanticism, and being able to judge rightly and wisely, one, the movies that we're watching, but two, then as we're looking toward your relationships, judging rightly and wisely your own heart in the relationship and the person that you're with. Have you experienced some of that in any of your friend groups or anything where someone's just like, I just love him and he's got to do whatever he wants, but I love him and I'll let him do whatever.
Yeah. All throughout high school.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was me in high school for sure.
Yeah, that's all of my students in high school. I am struck in listening to you say this, Kat. I keep thinking about this idea that I think we romanticize the idea that there is one person out there that is your soulmate, and this is the only person that God put on the planet for you to find. Here's the thing, is that there's a little bit of a both and there, I think, in that when we insist that there's the one, we need to look for the one. That is what allows us to so easily leave a relationship, because this person just wasn't the one for me.
Yep.
Yeah, I tried this person and maybe we even got married and maybe we had a couple of kids, but it's just not working out. So obviously this person's not the one, and I have the right, and I owe it to myself to keep looking for the one, right? It's all about me.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what is closer to the truth is that there are many people potentially that you could be perfectly happy with on the planet. There are 7 billion people on this planet. Like there are a couple people out there for all of us that we could be in a very successful relationship with. The difference is the commitment. So I don't think that there is just the one, but when you commit to someone, you make that person the one. You stop looking. You don't continue to give yourself additional options. And I think that's what the world misses out on, is that somehow it's romantic to think like, oh, he's my soulmate. He's the one I've been waiting for. But what happens when he lets you down? What happens when you realize that he is a sinner just like you are, and that he's not perfect? Where do you go from there then? So, I don't know what you all think about that. I think that's one of the places where Hollywood gets romance completely wrong.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's spot on. I loved that. It's like you make them the one. They're working on it.
Yeah.
But I think, funnily enough, when we're talking about all these rom-coms, and most of them I feel like are 90s, early 2000s rom-coms, because that just was the era. Like that's when we were talking about these, and it was
kind of
like
the heyday.
even like Titanic, and like that kind of sweeping romantic gestures and stuff like that.
Funny.
And
Ways.
And the guys are perfect. And I actually almost feel like it's an opposite trend now, because I was just thinking about it as you were saying that, like, in a bunch of the rom-coms we're talking about, you don't see any of that. But I feel like lately there's actually been a trend where it's actually going the opposite of that, where the guys are so less than perfect and they're very macho and tough and nonverbal. And my parents just finished watching the last season of Yellowstone, and that character Rip, and people love him, and he's totally not romantic at all. Like, and he calls the crap out when he sees it. And I was reading an article about The Witcher as well, that people really liked Henry Cavill as The Witcher, because same way, like, he's not a romantic person at all. He is just tell it like it is person. And so I just kind of
borderline monosyllabic.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to see if you guys had noticed maybe anything recently that is maybe counteracting that, love from the early 2000s, to where maybe now we are getting a little more realistic in a sense of, like, maybe instead of ideal, like romanticizing, maybe we're actually starting to not romanticize anymore. Maybe it's the opposite, where we want like the opposite of that.
Maybe, or maybe we're just romanticizing a different type of individual,
yeah.
right? Because you could argue that, okay, so the super tough, macho, monosyllabic guy still falls into the very poor communication skills.
Yeah.
Does he have any kind of conflict resolution skills other than just beating stuff up or walking away, right? And yet people romanticize that. We saw that with the Avengers, right, in 2012, where how many young women romanticized Loki?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was kind of horrifying. Really, like, and kudos to Tom Hiddleston for turning in a fantastic performance, a very nuanced performance that allowed you to go, well, maybe there is something underneath there. But a lot of people just went with, oh, he's just wounded puppy and I want to save him and fix him. And you're like, no, he is a horrific manipulator who committed genocide, who is, he's filled with vitriol and revenge, and he's so just everything that flows out of him is acid. Right? There isn't a kind, selfless bone in his body. Everything that he does is solely for him, and honestly, I agree with Thor, perceived slights. He has this poisonous idea that he belongs on the throne, and yet a bunch of women were like, he's cute, therefore I will absolutely romanticize away all of his horrific traits, right? Well, he won't lie to me because we're going to be soulmates.
We're going to be perfect.
He won't lie, and we do that. And to romanticize is to deal or describe in an idealized or unrealistic fashion. You make something more appealing than it really is. And we're so good at that with our own sin, right? We belittle, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But then we'll do it with our relationship partners, where we will absolutely put under the rug stuff that should not be under the rug, right? I appreciate and understand giving grace to someone in a relationship and working with them, encouraging them, helping them up when they stumble. It isn't an issue of you have to be perfect in a relationship, but is that person repentant and trying to change? Yeah. And so you're helping and encouraging them in their attempts to become more holy? Or are they just asking you to, as you said, just accept me as I am with my toxic trait, and that's what you get?
I think that's what like Hollywood is so good at. Like, I think honestly this is why women like romantic comedies and stuff like that and big sweeping romances, because we are good at really romanticizing everything, even the bad things that we find, because I think we have an attitude of, I can fix it. I can fix them. Which isn't always a bad thing, but it is bad if you're, thinking your whole relationship is going to be based on you fixing that person. And he's not really a bad guy. Like, I can bring out the soft side of him, even with those big, tough macho men. Like, I could make them soft, And we have this notion that, like, and Hollywood plays off that, it's like they know that women like those types of stories, which is why they will keep making rom-coms.
Yeah. I mean,
there's a scene actually in While You Were Sleeping that speaks to this in, I think, a gentler way. But one of the times that Lucy goes to the hospital to visit Peter, she says to him that if you romanticize someone from afar and you have this crush on someone, but they don't know who you are, she kind of sets it up that way. And then she says, but if only that person really knew you and knew the real you. And she's so cute when she says it. She says they would, of course, the perfect model they're with and realize that you were the one that they wanted to get old with. And I think kudos to that movie that she realizes she's wrong because she didn't even want Peter by the time the movie's over. But yeah, we do. I think women especially have this fixer complex that we are so sure that we will be the woman that some guy decides he wants to completely change for. And I think we really, and again, you kind of hinted at this too, Kat, that may not necessarily be a terrible thing, but I think we have to be very careful that we don't make an idol out of becoming a fixer, because it really, that I don't think that and take it for what it's worth from a single gal, but I don't think that the role of a married woman should be to have to change and fix her husband. That's,
No.
you can be on that journey together, but if he needs that much fixing, then you probably shouldn't have married, then maybe
Probably
that's
not.
where you don't. So
Red
There's
flag.
probably some black mold under that carpet.
Yeah. And we have culturally, we have such a conversation about toxic masculinity, but is there space to have a conversation about toxic femininity too? I think we almost, gosh, how do I say this? That we almost try to get men to come too far in the direction that we want them to be. There has to be a middle ground there for healthy masculinity.
Absolutely.
We can't romanticize either extreme of, like, just accept me how I am and everything's going to be fine. And let's just talk about our feelings for forever. Like that would be toxic femininity. And then I think, Maddie, what you're talking about here is the actual toxic masculinity of, borderline, almost abusive sometimes, but now we're almost romanticizing that because I can be the one who changes him. No, look for a guy who's in a healthy place emotionally and communicatively, and maybe pursue that man instead of the crazy guys. So,
well, and I think that can come down to that idea of are you viewing something through the lens of I want romance, right? Or am I romanticizing away sinful patterns and behaviors that this person is not repentant of, not admittant to? And so you can see some of that in a movie like 500 Days of Summer, right? Where and they did a great job in that movie where they show you a relationship that's not working, but they show how, and in this case it was actually the man that had romanticized the relationship. And you see there's this great shot where they show both his idea of what's happening and what's really happening. And it was a really clever way that they did that. And then there's actually a quote at the end of it where she's not a super romantic person. She was kind of on the more casual side. She never really thought there'd be this one person that she'd fall in love in that kind of way for. But she talks about it at the end, and she's like, there was this one guy, and she says, and Tom was right, which was this other gentleman, that there is someone for her. It just wasn't him. And so weirdly enough, like it's an odd little movie, but it has some clever, I think, kind of healthy things to say, but it also then shows how we can absolutely build up and romanticize away character flaws. So, and again, as we've said multiple times, like character flaws, we all have them. It's just a question of how you view them and what you want to do with those flaws.
Right.
Like in Sense and Sensibility, right? You have the two sisters, Eleanor being extremely pragmatic and going about, as she falls in love with Edward, in an extremely honorable way. And then when she discovers that he has a promise from old, she's heartbroken, but she doesn't flail about and make everyone suffer for it. She doesn't degrade him. In fact, she says, I hold him in greater esteem because he's a man of character who's going to stick to that promise, even though it now hurts us. But that's a man of character. What's he supposed to do? Throw over this other woman who has nowhere else to go? Who would serve him well as a wife just for feelings? Whereas her sister then throws all kinds of caution to the wind, presents herself in an extremely inappropriate way, for a man who ultimately is a scoundrel. and you see what's beautiful then about Sense and Sensibility is Marianne does learn from her sister, right? And I love the line at the end when she says something about her heartbreak, and Eleanor says, "You can't possibly compare, his behavior to yours." And she says, "No, I compare how I should have behaved to you."
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful portrait of what that kind of romanticizing, again, someone that you don't know, he's just really cute, he came in, he brought you flowers, but you don't know his back history, and his back history is he got some girl pregnant and left her destitute. Is that the man that you want to marry? Is that the character that you want to have?
Yeah.
And so I think, Maddie, you brought up some stuff, as we've spoken before, about Jane Austen and your great esteem
I mean,
for Jane Austen.
Yeah, I mean, nobody again, like nobody writes a romantic comedy like Jane Austen, because again, that like in Sense and Sensibility, it's like they actually learn something from it. Pride and Prejudice, same thing. Emma, same thing. Which Emma is really funny, and I like the new movie as well as the BBC version, as well as the old movie from the 90s that had the Emma Thompson in that one, or Gwyneth Paltrow. Thank you.
Yeah,
no, I'm thinking of Sense and Sensibility. I was thinking of Sense and Sensibility. Yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow. Actually, that one, I guess that I didn't like that one as much, but I do really love the BBC version of Emma. But it's the same thing. Like, she thinks, and that one, that time, it's it's the woman who thinks she's got it all figured out and she knows what she's doing, and but Mr. Knightley has to come all on and teach her a lesson, which I guess feminists probably wouldn't really like nowadays. Man teaching a woman a lesson, how dare he? But that's probably the problem with a lot of that's the problem with a lot of the modern movies, is that nobody's learning a lesson because we are too afraid to teach somebody a lesson, because it's just, again, just accept me for who I am. But Mr. Knightley, badly done, Emma, badly done.
Love that scene so much.
I know.
Well,
because he cares. He cares about her enough to say that. And that's what love is. Like, you care enough to tell them when they're wrong.
Well, and the Bible actually speaks to that as well. The Lord disciplines those he loves, right? Yes. He disciplines those he calls his children, because love is disciplining someone, because discipline is training. It's training you in the way that you ought to go. It's correcting you when you're wrong. But it's done out of, I want your betterment. I want your improvement. I want you to enjoy life more by not continuing in these paths that are only going to cause you heartbreak. And romanticizing away sins without calling them out, and staying with people who are unrepentant is only going to bring you heartbreak. I also thought of the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which isn't really a romantic comedy per se, but it definitely deals with relationships. Yeah. And they keep erasing their relationship and then keep getting back into the same toxic, screwed up relationship, because it's literally, they don't remember. Like, they're setting aside and blocking off the bad memories of what made that relationship not work. And that's like the epitome of romanticizing away those horrific character traits. There was a movie called Very Bad Things, which I don't know if you guys
I've never seen that one. No,
at all. It's a Black comedy. And it had to do with the idea that, like, getting to the wedding was all that mattered. And it's one of those things where, like, they go on the debauched, not hen trip, what would it be? Stag. The stag do, right? Yeah. The bachelor party to Vegas, and someone gets killed. Yeah. And so then they hide it. And then everything just proceeds to unravel in ridiculous Black comedy fashion. But at the end of the movie, there's this weird scene that I remember with Cameron Diaz, like, in her dress, out of her mind, dragging her now, like, disabled groom to the thing because she's like, I am getting married.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that married. Clip. It doesn't matter. And I remember that stuck in my head, that idea that like there are some women who are so obsessed with the wedding that they don't care who they marry.
Mm.
And I love this quote from Cher in Clueless, where she says, well, you see how picky I am about my shoes, and they only go on my feet.
Yeah.
And I thought, if we could only apply that to how we sometimes choose our romantic partners, if we would be just as picky about, does that shoe go with my outfit in regards to, does this person compliment me? Will this person encourage me, help me grow, help me mature? Will they be the iron that sharpens my iron in how we pursue the Lord together? So those kinds of things are always fascinating to me as I watch some of these romantic comedies where I'm like, that's going to be a train wreck. That's not a good match. That's going to be a horrible train wreck. And it's all because we romanticize that idea, or we have that idea of it's that one person. And so if I get that lightning bolt, that has to be the only person for me. And it's tricky. And I believe that it's dangerous. You need wisdom. You need foresight. You need to actually understand that person that you plan on partnering with, what their worldview is. How do they deal with when hardship comes their way? How do they deal with teaching you as you're going to teach each other? Proverbs actually says plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. So are you actually taking the time to get counsel and know more about this person before you commit yourself to them and to walking through life with them?
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.